Hey there, YouTube friends. I'm going to do my first of many planned side-by-side comparison videos. This first one will be aimed at the LLATL program, Learning Language Arts Through Literature, the Yellow Book and Orange Book, because these are the two volumes I was researching as I was planning for my son's third grade curriculum. I am in no way sponsored by Common Sense Press, who publishes this material. I just, was getting these out for myself from the library to start some research, and I thought I would share my research findings with you all in case you're in a similar position. I'm just going to offer some general comments that I, discovered when I was looking at these that apply to both books, and then I will get into opening them up and doing some side-by-side comparisons for you. First of all, there are a full 36 weeks in these books. Now, the Yellow Book actually has 36 lessons, 5 lessons per week. The Orange Book has 32 weeks of lessons plus 4 book study units. So when you add those book studies in at a week apiece, that gives you your full 36 weeks. Now, having said that, I believe the content of the Orange Book actually would probably take us more than 36 weeks. So we would probably spread this out over a longer period of time because some of the lessons contain more than what I know my son and I would do in a week's time. Also, I noticed in both books, biblical and character integration are throughout, but they're not very strong. It's just sort of a flavor of that. I wouldn't call them very strong in their biblical worldview as far as it coming through in the literature. I'm not making any statement about what the publishers believe or the authors believe, but there are definitely other curriculum out there that are more intentional and have a stronger emphasis on integrating the Bible into their curriculum. But this definitely has it. There are mentions and there are applications, but it's just what I would call a sprinkling or a flavor. I actually felt in both books that there wasn't a lot of structure to the writing assignments. Some of the bigger writing assignments in the Orange Book are actually very well laid out and very well structured, but the basic assignments like paragraph writing and even the book studies and those assignments, there's not really a clear schedule for when you're supposed to do what and how you're supposed to do certain things. So coming from curriculum that's very well scheduled and laid out, that was something that I noticed, and I will be highlighting that more in detail as we go through. I believe that both of these still require the teacher. These are actually both the teacher books. There is a separate student book that comes with it or that you have to purchase, and I believe that there are parts of the Orange Book that you could have your student do independently, but the Yellow Book, I feel, is going to be pretty much teacher-led most of the way. They are both copyrighted in the late 90s, so there are some outdated topics like using a phone book and a card catalog, but I think you can easily work around those sorts of things and bring it up to today's versions of those things. And there are reviews and assessments in both books as well. So those are the things that apply to both books. There are quite a few similarities, but definitely some differences in content and in difficulty. So let's head in and look at those. All right, first of all, I would say the student book for Yellow is not necessary, absolutely necessary, but I would say the Orange Book student book is. And the reason I say that is because if you look in here, let's try and maybe move this a little closer. All right, let me see if I can zoom in here just a little bit so you can see. Okay, so if you see here, orally or in writing, use the list of compound words you divided to complete the sentences. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of options to do exercises orally or copy something that's already written. So you could just have your child copy out of this book and complete the exercise, or do it orally. That is actually very common in this book. I'm looking for another example of it. See here, they just give you these list of words and want you to add ing. Your child can do that in a notebook. I mean, this is I feel the student book, I feel, would not be necessary with the let me zoom back out. Would not be necessary with the yellow one. A majority of the activities, I feel, you could just do in a notebook. And a lot of them give you the option to do them orally. But I do feel that the student book is necessary for Orange. I'm going to just real quickly turn to the back. This is a page I did not see on any online previews. This is the skill index. And this is everything that's covered in the book by topic. And I'll move my hand here so you can see what's in here. But I just want to point out in the composition section that the focus is on sentences and beginning instruction and paragraphs. You also write, your student will also write a friendly letter, but that is kind of the totality of the writing. You see, there are some other things that you do just once, but the majority of the writing will be sentence practice and beginning paragraph writing. And here's the rest of the content. You see that it does include spelling, and I will show you how that is done. And these are the 4 book links, or the 4 literature links that are included, and I will go over how those are done and how they compare to the Orange book. Now, if you look at the Orange book to compare, you'll notice there are a lot more grammar topics. Okay, there are book studies. One difference that you will note when we talk about the literature is the book studies they don't give you a second option for something else you could read in the Orange book. In the Yellow book, you do have an option to read something shorter, but you don't in the Orange book. And we'll flip over here. Notice in the composition section here, you are writing a lot of different types of pieces, not just sentences and paragraphs. You're writing poetry, you're writing descriptive writing, stories, you're doing journal writing, you do a research report, lots of different types of writing. And study skills are covered as well. One thing that you may have noticed when you were looking at those pages, they do have some other activities like puzzles and games. And so if your child is still kind of enjoys those sort of things and bringing that little bit of fun into learning, that's one thing to consider that's in this book that's not in this book. Not that this isn't fun or engaging, but they do have more of the puzzles and games, higher order thinking skills, things like that in this book. All right, so let's take a look at the first. We're going to talk about writing first, because that was my biggest concern when I was looking between these books as to where to place my son. I wanted to know how the books handled writing. This is the first instance where your student is asked to write a paragraph, and this is the only instruction that's given. So there are some questions over here like that can help give some prompts as to how to form the paragraph as far as content, but as far as actually how to write the paragraph, this is it. And this is the first instance where your child will write a paragraph. So this is the instruction that's given. I'm coming from a program that gives a ton of hand-holding and instruction when it comes to writing. So I was a bit taken aback by that, that was all that was there. However, when you get over here to the research unit, for example, and I'll show you several different kinds of writing, you get a ton of instruction. I mean, absolute ton. So if your child has never written a paragraph, there's no real instruction in here for how to write a paragraph in the Orange book. But so I think they probably assume that your child knows how to do that and do it well, because they're going to be doing a lot of paragraphs in the orange book. In the yellow book, they'll write a paragraph maybe 6 or 7 times in the yellow book, and that's the most writing they'll do. Though there's a lot of sentence writing. They just write multiple sentences, but not necessarily grouped together in a paragraph. But by the time they get over to the orange book, there's a research unit, and it gives you very detailed instructions, starting with how you research, where you find your information, how you take notes, how you keep all your notes together. And then starting here, this is a very detailed step-by-step approach for writing a state report. So if your child has to do that for your requirements to do a state study, here are some very detailed instructions. Take a look at your state flag, and this is an activity you can do. And here's where they want you to start looking at the state flower and the state bird, the state economy, the state history. All of that is done in a very step-by-step fashion. Similarly, when you get to writing in a newspaper style, in the orange book, they go past what's covered in yellow, and I'll show you that in a minute. In yellow, they kind of go over this, like actually reading the newspaper article and pulling out the 4 W's and how. But this in here in the orange book goes a step further, and they actually teach you how to be a reporter and how to conduct an interview and write a story. And they go over the sections of the newspaper. Who does the different jobs at the newspaper? What are the different tasks that have to be done to publish a newspaper? It really goes into depth in the orange book about writing not only a factual story, but it actually goes into the interview style as well. In the yellow book, however, when it covers the newspaper, I don't think I put a sticky there, 98. All that your child will do is actually read a newspaper article and respond to it. So there's not any opportunity in this book to actually write a newspaper article or be a reporter. It's basically just looking at the newspaper, and then going through in the following days and answering your who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. So this is not creating newspaper content, but just studying it. So that's one huge difference I noted, that there's not really a whole lot of writing instruction here, but all they're really getting to is paragraphs and a friendly letter. There is a lot of writing instruction here, but they're doing a lot more writing. So I actually kind of thought it's a big jump in between the two writings. So that's why placement would be very important when you consider composition. Okay, moving along to another comparison, the reading and literature. So this is what you would do for reading or literature in the yellow book. Now this is meant to be read by your student. However, I have heard certain reviews saying that you could do some team reading here, and that has worked well. They do give you 2 options in the yellow book here. You'll see, I'm sorry, that's off the screen. They give you 2 options to either read the whole book, The White Stallion, or they've created an excerpt here that you can just read with your student, or have your student read the whole thing. You could split it up over a couple days and have your student read that whole thing. It's really not that long. My child is reading about that much now in a day's reading. So there are questions for both the book, if you were to read the book, and for the excerpt that's in the book. Or the excerpt that's put in this book. There are vocabulary words here and some activities that you can do. And this is actually the first instance of the paragraph in week 6. It comes in the literature link. So one thing I notice as a difference between the yellow and the orange here is the option to read the shorter excerpt. Okay, that's obviously one difference. I also noticed that the way that they handle vocabulary is just basically look up the words. Okay, just look up their words. There's really no activity for the child to actually use the words in any way. So just kind of keep that in mind. When you come over here, oh, and there's no schedule. There's no schedule. You just have to figure out how you want to break it up if you read the whole book. If you're doing just the excerpt, you could do it in just a day or two. But you come over to the orange book, and the difference here is there's quite a difference. So this is actually the only literature option that they give you. What they schedule is what they assume you will do. So there's no shorter reading for you to read. They just expect that you will read the book. And they use content from the book in the weeks following this. So it really does help add cohesion, but it's not entirely necessary. I have read reviews where it says it's entirely necessary, and I've read this entire book and maybe except 4 lessons. And I did not feel that reading this particular book was necessary to do the other lessons. That's just my opinion. It would be a nice flow if you did it, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. One thing that's the same between the books is there really is no schedule here. It doesn't tell you what to do on any given day. Here's questions that are by chapter. So this, I think, would be a little easier to use because you know what chapter the questions come from. There's some activities, some beginning story element analysis, and one more activity here. But there's nothing assigned like per day. So I don't really know how they expect you to break it down. There's really no guidance for that. But they do say that you should read this before you start the other lessons here. Lesson 1. Okay. So one thing I noticed that was different was the vocabulary. They actually have you use it. And it's a brief activity, but they do get more involved as they go. But they at least have you use the vocabulary, and I liked that a little bit more than just looking it up. They also have, like I showed you, the beginning literary analysis. Very basic, but again, there's really none of that in the yellow book. So that's one little comparison too. All right, the next thing that I will hit on, let's see, poetry, because that's kind of literature. Well, it is literature. There's no poetry in here other than some basic rhyming exercises and kind of building the base for couplets and things like that. But really, there's no writing of poetry, no analyzing in the yellow book. In the orange book, there's a whole unit on poetry, and it's very well done, I think. Oh, your child actually gets to study several different kinds of poetry, as you see here, and they will write some poetry as well. So you will start with analyzing poems and talking about some very basic elements. That they're going to start with just a couplet, the 2 rhyming lines, and then they'll build on that and get into haikus and all sorts of different things. So they'll start with something that's probably a little familiar to them, and then they're actually going to work on some copy work and things like that. They're going to, like I said, write their own poem. I'm trying to think where they start writing their own poem. I should have probably marked where they start writing their own poem. But see, it's really long. They spend a long time in poetry. This is several weeks that they're spending, and they're not doing that in the yellow book. So that was a big difference. But when I look at that, though, and I'm thinking of my 3rd grader, to be honest, I'm thinking that I would love maybe 1 or 2 of the poetry exercises to be included in here. But when I look at that whole long poetry unit, I don't think my son would be ready for that. I feel like it's very well done, but there's just a lot of it. And I feel like the jump from here to here is just so big in so many areas. And so I'm glad that I was able to look at these. All right, the last two areas I'm going to compare real quick, I'm sorry this is getting kind of long, is copywork, dictation, and spelling and handwriting. So I guess those are kind of the last two areas. I'll look at spelling first. Here is spelling. There are, there are 5 words in this box, and there are set activities every day of the week for spelling. They have you copy the words the first day, and there's always just 5 words with a bonus word. That's all that they give you. Then on day 2, you will do say, spell, say. Then day 3, you'll do a spelling bee. Day 4, you can do a practice test orally or written. And day 5, you take your final test. That's the same pattern every week with this. I'm going to flip ahead to just show you some of the, this is in one of the review lessons. And here are the first, I think, 12 lessons worth of spelling words. You can look through this, pause if you need to look at the types of spelling words. The words in the yellow book do follow some sort of pattern, either the silent K, like in KN words, the short E, the EA when it makes a short EA, when it makes a short E sound, like in bread or head. So they do follow some sort of pattern in the yellow book, and they have the set activities every day. They're simple and basic, but there is something scheduled. In the orange book, the way they do spelling is different. Where did I not mark spelling? I guess I didn't mark spelling. So we will just quickly find. Basically, they give you the option to choose. Here we go. They give you the option to choose your own words. So there's no spelling book. They do give a spelling tip of some things, to kind of remember and practice. But there's nothing scheduled through the week except one reminder to take a spelling test that's optional on day 5. Here is the only mention on day 1 of spelling. And it says list 3 to 6 words that you should study for spelling this week. So that's something that you probably as the parent would have to, work with the child and choose those words. And they do give suggested words here. Here they have night, find, and dollars. Okay, so they don't really have the same pattern words that they did in the yellow book. Usually these words come out of the passage that they're copying or dictating. So it's a more, I don't know what you'd call it. It's a very Charlotte Mason approach. I don't know if this curriculum claims to be that way as far as a method, but that's how a lot of the Charlotte Mason-based curriculum do spelling. I know Heart of Dakota does it that way, and so does Simply Charlotte Mason. They use their spelling words from their dictation passage. So that's just a change between the yellow and the orange, and maybe something to consider if you have a child who needs a more structured spelling program. They do get up to like 4 or 5 words, I've noticed, in the suggested column, but they really don't do anything with the words beyond that first day as far as spelling practice. There's just that optional test on day 5. So just a little difference there. Speaking of dictation, you will start dictation at week 10 in this yellow book, and you start it a little earlier than that in this book. The passages are longer, and like I said, you will take your spelling lists from them. So the dictation is about the same, just the passages get longer in here. And last thing I will compare between the two, if you're looking between these for placing your child in one of these books, is handwriting and copywork. So the handwriting portion of this I want to show you relates to cursive. If your child has had no instruction in cursive whatsoever, I just want to make note of this. They do provide the practice for cursive handwriting, but they don't provide any stroke instruction. So there's no arrows or even verbal exercises or verbal directions for how to form the letters. So it's just the letters and go practice the letters. So I thought that was a little different. In this book, there's no cursive instruction at all. So if your child places in this orange book in every other way, but has not yet had cursive instruction, you might want to purchase another program to do cursive handwriting if that's something you want to include. The copy work isn't as much in this book because they are writing so many other types of composition work. So they don't do quite as many copy these sentences, copy this passage as they do in this book. There's a lot more of that happening here than here. So I hope that was helpful. I was a little bit intimidated by the time because I saw this was getting really long. So I kind of was hurrying through some of my notes here. I did have a page of notes. I was trying to give you as much information as I could. Just some concluding thoughts. I think the orange would actually take us more than a year. I mentioned that before, but I hope, that doesn't, steer you away from getting it because it is tremendous. I love both of these books. I would personally love to use both of them. It is exactly how I want to teach language arts. It's how I would want to learn language arts. But guess what? I'm not the one who's the student. And so I have to consider how my son learns as well. So I don't want that to influence you by me saying that this would be more than probably 36 weeks for us, because maybe if you have a child who loves writing and who loves literature, they would breeze through it easily in a year. I also want to just say one other comment, and then I will wrap this up, that having come from BJU Press, which is a traditional way of doing language arts, I find, we did BJU Press K1-2 for language arts, and I feel that we would place solidly in this book, which they do say is third grade skills. So I do believe that is in fact where we would place if we were doing the LLATL program, and it would feel just like, we were coming in right at the right place. I don't feel like we'd be behind or ahead. The spelling that they choose here, we have 20 spelling words with BJU Press, so that would be a big difference. And a lot of the words I noticed until we got up until like unit 12 or 13 or week 12 or 13, we really wouldn't see any new spelling words. So that was one difference I noted. But because there were so many other new things and a totally new style, I probably wouldn't add spelling. I would just allow it to be done as is here. But I just wanted to show you inside a little bit. It wasn't a total flip through. I did mark things out to show you because I really wanted to just compare side by side to show you, if you were looking at these two books and trying to figure out where to place your child, what you could expect going from these two books, or going from this book to this book. If you have any questions, I will have these books for a while. I'm going to hang on to them. I can try and post a follow-up video or just answer your question in the comments. I hope this was helpful for you. Be sure to like this video if it was. It lets me know you want me to make more of these. And I already have several other side-by-side comparisons planned out and ready to go, so I hope to get those up for you soon. Take care.